The neoclassical architecture of Washington, London, and Paris suggests that Western democracy was a historical inevitability. In reality, this entire aesthetic, and the political system it houses, is a fragile accident. If a single morning in 490 BCE had followed the Persian plan, these cities would be dominated by the gilded ziggurats of Ahura Mazda. You would exist as a subject of an absolute, centralized monarchy, where the concept of the individual never formed. Our global language would not be English, but a variation of Old Persian, recorded in this complex cuneiform script. This entire alternate timeline was completely cancelled by a single 10-minute logistical miscalculation on a bloody Greek beach. The strategic truth of the Battle of Marathon is far more cynical than the mythological victory of freedom over tyranny. King Darius I of Persia was the ancient world's first hyper-rational globalist CEO. He managed his domain through administrative efficiency rather than raw, cartoonish warlordism. This gold derrick is evidence of the empire's massive corporate infrastructure. Darius unified his continent-spanning territory through standardized currency, centralized economics, and a sophisticated transcontinental postal system. From the perspective of Persepolis, the decentralized Greek city-states were a minor supply chain disruption on the imperial periphery. They were a localized management problem to be solved, not an existential threat. Controlling 99% of the world causes an empire to view all conflicts as logistical puzzles. It blinds the leadership to the power of a desperate ideology. Darius deployed an expeditionary force specifically designed to trigger an internal political surrender in Athens, aiming for a managed takeover rather than a total war of annihilation. The Persians anchored at the Bay of Marathon to establish a static, menacing presence. The flat geography allowed them to display their overwhelming numbers, while their agents within Athens worked to collapse the city's resolve from the inside. For 5 days, the Persian lines held their position. They relied on the terrifying reputation of their immortal elite units to break the Greeks' will without ever having to draw a sword. This strategy of psychological soft power was a flawless corporate maneuver, but it relied on the fatal assumption that a cornered enemy will make a rational, self-preserving calculation. On September 12, 490 BCE, the Persians made a fateful choice. To bypass the Greek army, they loaded their elite cavalry onto transport ships to strike Athens directly. This left their static infantry completely exposed, without the mobile flank protection they needed. Game theory suggests a different move, a feigned retreat to lure the heavy Greek infantry into the open plain. This would have allowed the cavalry to encircle them in a cannae, a military maneuver where an army is deliberately drawn into a collapsing center, only to be surrounded and crushed from the rear. Instead, the Persian command prioritized logistical efficiency over tactical security. They completely underestimated the explosive potential of an opponent with no path for retreat. Seeing the Persian cavalry depart triggered a psychological snap within the Greek ranks. With their only escape route gone, the Greeks transformed into fanatical combatants. The Greeks charged in a phalanx, a dense block of infantry with overlapping shields and heavy spears. This heavy bronze wall relentlessly crushed the lightly armored Persian administrators, who were never intended for a sustained high-intensity melee. The Persian center buckled almost immediately, leading to a chaotic slaughter across the beach as the imperial system disintegrated into individual panic. Perfectly optimized systems are inherently fragile. They remain vulnerable to the chaotic, irrational initiative of an entity that has absolutely nothing left to lose. The survival of Athens allowed for the birth of philosophy, the scientific method, and the foundational concept of the independent individual. This stands in direct contrast to the Persian model, a world where humans were managed subjects of a single monolith rather than citizens of a state. The empire failed because of its ontological hubris, the absolute belief that its corporate administrative reality was the only valid truth in the universe. Absolute power collapses when its own logistical certainty becomes a fatal blind spot, unable to calculate the potential of a desperate opponent who has already lost everything.